What's going on, draft fans? Welcome back. Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I am your host, Russell Brown. You guys can find me on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft. It's the College Football National Championship recap show. And, man, the end of the season. It's over. No more college football. No more college game day on Saturdays. It's all full-on draft mode from here on out. No more Saturday matchup shows. Looking forward to LSU versus Florida or Michigan versus Michigan State or anything like that. We are now breaking down prospects. We're breaking down draft projection, where a player specifically fits, what team, so on and so forth. A lot to get into with the college football playoff. Before I jump in to the college football playoff and the national championship game, Joe Judge, Giants, fired. Let him go. He's done. He's gone. I just want to say that for the Giants fans out there, because we talked about Black Monday yesterday. We talked about some of the moves like Matt Nagy fired by the Bears, Mike Zimmer fired by the Vikings, all these different moves. Brian Flores with the Dolphins. The one move that didn't happen yesterday was Joe Judge fired by the Giants. And we've all justified the reasons behind he should be fired, why he should be fired. And he was not until today, about an hour ago, Joe Judge. You never want to root for anybody to lose their job, but when you do a poor job, it's finally time for me to root against you. And that's what Joe Judge made me do. So the Giants will get a fresh start at head coach, general manager. If I were them, I'd be on the phone with Brian Flores yesterday, and that would be the guy that I'm trying to get. That's the guy that I'm trying to grab to ensure that I think, the right guy for the job, and I think he can do a good job there in New York. It's a bigger market. It's bigger media, but I think there's a lot of good that can happen there. I would be curious if he would be able to retain like a defensive coordinator like Patrick Graham. So we'll see how that all plays out for New York, but Joe Judge is out. So moving forward, national championship yesterday, lots to unpack. A lot to unpack. In a game that was not as high scoring as we initially thought until basically the fourth quarter, where 29 points were put up. There was a lot of field goals. There was a lot of miscues. There was a lot of odd penalties, a lot of weird breaks in the game that went to a specific team, particularly Alabama. But there was also times where Georgia felt like was getting close to the head of Bryce Young and pressuring him. And I'm all for hitting quarterbacks. I'm a former defensive end. I'm all for going for that stuff. But there was definitely times where I was like, that might be a little bit close. But I think if it wasn't the national championship game, we'd be seeing some of those flags. I'm glad we didn't see all of those flags, but we did see some weird ones. We did see some weird calls. We did see a weird fumble where Branch, the cornerback, number 14, just like kind of randomly walks to the sidelines. It wasn't even like moving, and he grabs the ball and is fortunately inbound somehow. I don't know how they called that a forward or a fumble when it looked like he was, Stetson Bennett, the quarterback for Georgia, was throwing it looked like an incomplete pass. But it's here nor there. The outcome didn't really matter that much. Georgia wins 33-18 last night. They win their first national championship since 1980. 41 years. I don't know what anybody was doing 41 years ago. I know what I was doing. Nothing. But Georgia back on top. They've been on top pretty much all year long. And I'll be honest, the betting man that I am, I did not think that they were going to pull this off. Before the game, they mentioned, in matchups like this where there's the rematch, the team that lost the first one is 5 or 6-0. I can't remember exactly what the stat was. It was something like that. And I'm like, man, there's no way Nick Saban's going to lose this game. And they end up losing the game. Now, I will say Alabama did some questionable things, but without question, the biggest, I think, takeaway away from the speed from Georgia's defense, which we'll talk about, the biggest question mark, the biggest, there's no doubt about it. The biggest debate going into the draft will be Jameson Williams, the wide receiver for Alabama. If you missed the game last night, shame on you. But if you did, things happen. I get it. Jameson Williams, projected top receiver off the board, all things considering. Maybe some people had Chris Olave or Treylon Burks or something like that. But with Jameson Williams, he's had such a strong finish to the year. The last 2 months have been phenomenal for him, really the whole season, but he has showcased his ability as a gunner in special teams, on punt returns. He has shown, or on punts, he's shown what he can do as a receiver, what he can do after the catch. He's showcasing 4.3 type speed, and he runs up the seam, and he goes down, and he's hurt. And you can visibly see in the video, on the field, in the replay, him running up the seam, and all of a sudden something pop in his knee. Initial thought was like maybe this is just like a minor delocation. Maybe something got delocated. It's not. It's a torn ACL. And about 15 minutes ago, as I was just kind of prepping for the show, it is reported a official torn ACL for Jameson Williams. And he, again, projected top wide receiver in the 2022 NFL Draft. It's believed that he'll have surgery within the next week or so, and he will make a full recovery. He will still be as fast as he's ever been. He'll regain and retain his 4.3 type speed. He'll still be the player that people project him to be. That's what everybody is kind of alluding to here. And I hope so, because he deserves it. And he's one of those players that is on a very good football team. And I'm just prepping people for next year, because next year we're going to get to the Chips Ahoy Snow Cone Bowl. And we're going to see some random 2 teams with 3 or 4 draft picks a team, draft-eligible players, draftable guys, and those players are going to opt out. And we're going to go, well, not all of us, but some people are going to go, well, he doesn't have pride. He doesn't care about the team. He doesn't want to finish with his teammates, his brothers. No, it's a business decision. And nobody can fault Jameson Williams for playing last night. You're playing for the national championship. Of course you're going to play. It's an unfortunate event. But in that unfortunate event, there's an opportunity, there's a chance where he could fall down draft boards and potentially be out of the first round. I don't think that will happen, but Jalen Smith, you look back a few years ago when he was coming out of Notre Dame, he fell out of the first round and was an early second-round pick to the Dallas Cowboys. Jameson Williams could very well fall to pick 33, 34, maybe goes to a team like Jacksonville or Detroit in the second round. I doubt that, but you just never know. And with a deep wide receiver group, these teams are going to get an opportunity to fall in love with Burks, Olave, Garrett Wilson, Drake London. They're going to get this opportunity to get first-hand look at other receivers. Jahan Dotson out of Penn State. So I really don't know how to take this. But going back to the game, if they would have not lost Jameson Williams, I think this would have been a different outcome. I really do. If they didn't lose John Mechie, and Jameson Williams, I don't even think it's a conversation. I don't think Georgia's defense would have been able to blitz as much as they did yesterday. Underneath stuff that they were trying to do, that Alabama was trying to do, getting it involved with a bunch of different receivers not named Williams or Mechie. It didn't work out, but all that stuff would have opened up. And then if they would have got aggressive, if Georgia would have got aggressive, they would have gotten beaten deep, because Williams would have outran some defenders, and so would have Mechie. But it's just one of those things. Shoulda, woulda, coulda, injuries, all of that stuff. It's not excuses. It's just the conversation. But the conversation leads you now to Georgia's defense, which is legit. And this defense, led by Nakobe Dean, who had himself a day yesterday, who probably will be the first linebacker off the board. I would be surprised if he wasn't. Obviously, it could happen where Devin Lloyd is or somebody else. But even though he had 4 tackles, even though he only had a pass deflection, you can see the leadership. You saw the range, and he does have some misses. I'm not saying he's a picture-perfect prospect, but Nakobe Dean Despite some of the missed tackles that you'll see on tape, that you'll see in this game against Alabama last night, Nakobe Dean, smart kid, great leader. You saw it on the field firsthand. I think teams are going to love that, and I think teams with multiple first-round picks, the Jets, the Giants, the Lions, the Eagles, these teams are going to fall in love with this kid, and I think they're going to roll the dice on him without question. Keep in mind, there's other teams with just one first-round pick that need a linebacker that are going to do the exact same thing. Aside from that, Channing Tindall, despite being a rotational linebacker, what a game he had as far as just showcasing his speed, showcasing his range. He had a sack. He had 8 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. Really just a phenomenal showing for Channing Tindall, who I'm a big fan of. Will be that day 2 linebacker that emerges, becomes a starter in this league, and carves out a really nice role for himself because of his athleticism, because of his effort, because of everything that he provides. It translates to Sundays. Everything that you've seen him provide for Georgia this year and previous years, it translates to Sundays. Next, Lewis Kine. I mean, how can you not be impressed with this kid? 6'1", 200, had an interception this year, 43 tackles, but in this game he had 7 tackles, one tackle for loss, and he was everywhere. He was everywhere on this field. He was flying up the field to flats. He was showing off his range, taking the perfect angle, perfect pursuit to the football downhill. You love to see it. And he is going to go, I think, much sooner than any of us anticipated going into this game. And it's going to be because of this game that he shoots up some draft boards. I hate saying that one game changes a player, but in these big stages, it tends to do that. And he will be, I don't want to say the first safety off the board because I think that's a little rich, but he will shoot up boards. I mean, there's no question about it, especially when you look at, a safety like Jalen Catalone who went back to Arkansas. Lewis Kine's got an opportunity to move up the board. Next, Devonta Wyatt. He did get dinged up in this game. He did have 4 tackles, but man, you see the explosiveness from him. You see the lateral quickness from him, his ability just to move. He's got a really good flexible lower body. They mentioned how he lost 40 pounds going into the year. Devonta Wyatt is a big dude despite losing 40 pounds. 6'3", 315, could be potentially the first defensive tackle off the board because teams might fall in love with the quickness, the athleticism, and because it provides you a little bit more versatility, in my personal opinion, because you can align him in multiple spots. Lastly, Jordan Davis. Only 2 tackles, a tackle for loss, a pass deflection, but Jordan Davis, first-round pick. I mean, there's no other way around it. 6'6", 340. He was out there on an offensive series down in the goal line, and he could play left tackle if he wanted to. So Georgia's defense really showcased what they could do. Kaiir Walker also led the way with tackles, 8 tackles, 6'4", 240. I don't think we've talked enough about him from just everybody talking about linebackers. He doesn't get enough love. But he's been a consistent tackler for this team. He's always in on the mix. He shows good range. I like how he comes downhill, and I love his pursuit to the football. And lastly, look, there's so many defensive players here for Georgia. It's hard to get into every single one of them. But I'm just going to talk lastly here. Trayvon Walker, 6'5", 275. There's been a lot of discussion that he's a potential first-round pick. He had 6 sacks this year. He had a sack in this game. He had 3 total tackles. He had a sack against Michigan. The last 2 weeks, he's really turned it up. And at 6'5", 275, it's hard to say what he's going to play at the next level because in the Georgia defense, he's played pretty much everywhere. He's done a lot of different things. He's dropped back into coverage. He's rushed the passer. He's been consistent in stopping the run. He's been everything that you want out of a player of his size. But I think the biggest play that stood out yesterday was there was a broken play. I'm trying to remember who was running the ball for Alabama. I want to say it was Brian Robinson. And he got out into space, and he gets upfield, and he gains about 15, 20 yards. Maybe it was 10. But either way, he gains substantial yardage, more yardage than he gained in his previous touches in the game at that point. And out of nowhere, this 6'5", 275 defensive lineman, Trayvon Walker, is chasing him down the field. That type of effort shows on tape consistently, and his ability, his length, with his athleticism, going to go a long way. It's going to go a long way. First-round potential, especially when you get into that, I think, the back end of that first round, teams that want to get a potential fifth-year option on an edge rusher, especially if you have multiple picks. And you look at a team like Philly, they've got 3 picks that could be in the top 25. It'd be hard for them, I think, to pass on a player like a Trayvon Walker. And I know I mentioned a little bit about them maybe looking at like a David Ojabo, maybe a Myjai Sanders, yesterday's show, on the preview show, and yesterday's show that I did talking about the top 15. But I think Trayvon Walker makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense for this team. So, yeah, I mean, Georgia's defense all over the place. Nolan Smith had a sack as well. A lot of love to him. I mean, they have so many players that are going to get drafted. It's insane. It truly is insane. Brock Bowers, their tight end, we'll talk about him quite a bit in the future. Zamir White ran really well. James Cook, who will be at the Senior Bowl, showcased some pass-catching ability, is Dalvin Cook's brother. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up, but he had a career year this year. Most receptions, most carries, most rushing yards, most rushing touchdowns, most everything. He looked really good on that 67-yard run, and it was the run that really took it to the next level for Georgia's offense. Really got them out of the gate in the second half and looked like they finally were ready to roll. Zamir White, though, consistently carving, 5-6 yards a carry. He had, again, 84 yards and a score. And Stetson Bennett, I mean, despite some of the unfortunate events of this offense, of the penalties, of the fumble, of some of the sacks, he still comes out, and after that fumble, 3 straight completions and throws an absolute bomb for a touchdown, which put basically the nail in the coffin. They went up 19-18, went for 2, didn't get it, and it didn't matter. Alabama didn't recover. Alabama throws a pick 6, and that was the game. That was pretty much the game. It ended up being 33-18. But that's it. That's the year. But beyond that, there's a lot more to this game than just all the star power on defense, the injury to Jameson Williams, some of the missed throws from Bryce Young. And by the way, if anybody has choice words for Bryce Young, like he panicked in the big moment, he did as best he could without his 2 best receivers and with really, I think, a game plan that was poor. And that's where I wanted to go to next, was not the drop passes by some of these other playmakers, but by Bill O'Brien and his decision-making when it came to these drives. Because I have no idea what he was thinking on some of these play calls. And I tweeted it out yesterday that they need to get the ball in the hands of Brian Robinson a little bit more, and they did in the second half, and it started to work. But the play calling at certain spots in this game were questionable. They were so questionable. Like the first 2 plays of the game, handoffs to Brian Robinson got 8 yards. They started moving down the field. Things went well. And obviously, like we said earlier, the injury to Jameson Williams really took the wind out of their sails. And I understand that probably as a play caller, it makes it pretty tough on what you decide to do. But it's 2nd and 1 from the Georgia 26. This is the, 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th drive of the game. And this is what was killing me, 2nd and 1. They'd get in very manageable 2nd and 3rd downs, and they're throwing the football. And it was like, I don't know if it was Nick Saban, if it was Bill O'Brien, but somebody somewhere lost the idea of looking at what was happening on the field, because it was very evident that they were going out and they were blitzing. They were sending Channing Tindall. They were sending Nakobe Dean up the middle, who is an effective blitzer. Trayvon Walker was moving around. All these moving parts were happening, and they were attacking upfield. And you continue to throw the football underneath to the flats, mesh concepts, stick routes, everything that you could try, drop passes, incomplete passes, the quarterback's being flushed out of the pocket, he's got to throw it away, chuck it a mile down the field. It just doesn't make sense. And this was after, keep in mind, you got 40 yards down the field quickly with Jameson Williams. You get 9 yards right after that, after he's hurt. 2nd and 1. Wouldn't it make sense to calm your quarterback down? I mean, he just lost another playmaker, and you go with another pass, then a false start, and then another pass, which got 3 yards on 3rd and 6 and a field goal. You can't win a national championship by continuously kicking field goals. We can all agree there. But then you're up 9-3. You get the ball back in really good territory, and you had you get the ball back. You get the big pass play to Cameron Lado for 61 yards. 1st and goal from the 8. Brian Robinson up the middle for 2. 2nd and goal. It's a pass. Nakobe Dean breaks up the play. I think Lado dropped it too. And then the very next play, 3rd and goal, and Channing Tindall gets the sack. And it's a loss of 13 because he's flushed out of the pocket. And this was where the leadership came right there, right? Like Nakobe Dean got on Channing Tindall for messing up a play previously, telling him get his head in the game, and the very next play he comes out and get a sack. That's the leadership qualities I'm talking about with Nakobe Dean. But 2nd and goal from the 6, like I said, you're down your 2 best playmakers. You just had a big gain. Just keep pounding the ball. And that was what made the difference for Georgia in the second half. They weren't really running the ball effectively in the first half. They come out in the second half, they come out in 13 personnel. And they're pounding it down the field with Zamir White and James Cook. And Cook has the big run for 60-plus yards. And Alabama does not. Another field goal. Then they come out, they punt. It's the end of the quarter. They had an opportunity to get the ball there, and they just let the clock run. I didn't understand it. They took a timeout after about 20, 25 seconds went off the clock. Georgia picks up the first down, and that was it. They go to the half. Fortunately, they get Georgia to punt right after the half, but then there's the interception to follow. There's the missed field goal after a 17-play drive. 17 plays. 2nd and 11, incomplete pass. 3rd and 11. I mean, some of these aren't all bad. But how about this? 3rd and goal from the 3. The passing game, 1st and goal from the 5, pass incomplete. Then you run the ball. On 2nd and goal, you get 2 yards. If you're getting 2 yards a pop from the 5, you run it 3 times, you get 6 yards, you score. There was no jet sweeps. There was no runs to the boundary, and I get it. All these players for Georgia's defense were fast. Everybody was amazed at how fast these guys were. But all you did was the same stuff over and over and over again. One of the plays that really stood out for Alabama was they had a receiver on the boundary, flanked out wide. He was probably about 4 yards off the line of scrimmage. It looked like Canadian football type play. And it looked like he was about to throw it looked like Bryce Young was going to throw a potential screen there. The linebacker sees this and flows to that side, flows to that boundary, and opening up to the field side is a swing pass or a screen pass. I can't remember what it was, but it opened it up. There was nobody in the middle. They got positive yards out of it. They never went back to it. So I could not understand this play calling. I just could not. There was no urgency on Alabama's part when they were down 8. There was no urgency when they were down a point, 1st and 10, and then they run the ball on 1st and 10. When any other 1st and 10, I felt like they were throwing. So I could dissect drive by drive, play by play, but it was very discouraging watching Bill O'Brien call that football game from an offensive perspective. So I blame him partially for not coming up with a better game plan. It didn't feel like he really adjusted, and I get it. Like, it's hard to adjust when you have two of your best playmakers gone, but you do have Brian Robinson, who had a career day against Cincinnati the week before. You did have, Slade Bolden, who did a lot underneath, but where's Billingsley? Where's this guy been? Guy was projected as the top tight end, and he didn't record a stat yesterday. Where was he at? So I don't understand Alabama's play calling down in the red zone. I don't understand putting so much pressure with 57 pass attempts on Bryce Young after losing another playmaker. It was questionable, but there was a lot of talent there, and the big talent is obviously defensively for Georgia. We'll get into some of their offensive linemen closer to the Senior Bowl and in the All-Star games and stuff like that. But defensively, there's so much speed. There's so much talent. It'll be interesting to see who ultimately declares and who potentially stays. Obviously, the seniors will be gone and stuff like that. But it was a good national championship for the most part. It really was. And it sucks seeing the college football season come to a close because it's been so fun covering it this year. It's been so fun talking about it. But if you're a fan of the game and you're dogging Bryce Young, shame on you. He'll bounce back, and this team will bounce back. We all know that. Alabama's going to be around. There's no secret there. Christian Harris, Will Anderson, we'll talk about these guys defensively. Christian Harris had one hell of a day, 6'2", 232. Doesn't have to declare for the draft. He could come back. Dallas Turner looks very promising. And obviously next year, I think we'll do a heck of a lot of talking about Will Anderson and Dallas Turner off the edge. And this is one of those things. The Alabama defense was young. They had some veterans there, but ultimately they were young. And these guys got some big-time playing experience, and I think it's going to help them in the long run. I think they'll replace their playmakers on the outside. They'll figure it out offensively and all that stuff. But crazy way for the year to end with Georgia on top. I just didn't see it happening. I don't think anybody would have projected it or predicted it back in the summer. Maybe I'm wrong there. Sure, we could have said they were a top 5 team, but no way I would have guessed that Alabama and even really Clemson would have not been in the mix here. But obviously, things are the way that they are. So, that's it. That's the national championship. That's the recap. Jameson Williams, torn ACL, going to get surgery done on it. Should make a full recovery. And we'll obviously see where he ends up in the 2022 NFL Draft. That was the biggest, I think, storyline from a draft prospect last night. And then again, obviously, the defensive players and all that stuff. So you guys can get caught up with the Senior Bowl stuff. You can get caught up with a bunch of other episodes of the Cover One NFL Draft Podcast. All you have to do is search, find, and subscribe to the Cover One NFL Draft Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spreaker. Literally wherever you go about your podcast, you can find us. Add us into your mix. Add us into your rotations. Over the last, I think, 5 days, there's been 4 podcasts, so you have plenty to get caught up on. So get caught up on it. Next week, we're going to have some guests on the show. We'll get back into the Senior Bowl stuff probably either tomorrow or Thursday, and then Friday we will preview the NFL playoffs and maybe some of the implications that it could mean from a draft perspective for those teams that I see losing. So we'll have some fun there. And it's go time. It's NFL draft time. So everybody, like I said, find the podcast. Find me on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft. I'll talk to you later this week. I'll promote this like I always do. If you want to hit me up, talk a little football, whatever you got to do. But until next time, this is Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast.